Dr. Michael Hayes was used to late nights in his lab. He enjoyed the quiet, the hum of the machines, and the steady glow of the monitors. But tonight was different. Tonight he wasn't alone. It all started when he heard a strange sound outside the lab, a low hum, followed by a crash. Curious, Michael grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside. The lab was located in a remote area, far from any city, so visitors were rare. As he walked through the dark, he saw something glinting in the distance. It looked like metal, but it was too far to be sure. As Michael got closer, his heart began to race. There, lying in a small crater, was what looked like a spaceship. It was sleek, with smooth silver surfaces, and had strange symbols etched along the sides. Smoke was rising from one of its engines, and the ground around it was scorched. Michael knew immediately that this was something beyond human technology. He approached cautiously, his mind racing with questions. Who or what was inside? As he circled the craft, he noticed a hatch on the side. It was slightly open. Taking a deep breath, Michael reached out and pulled it wider. The door creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit interior. That's when he saw her. Lying on the floor, unconscious, was a girl. But she wasn't human. Her skin had a faint blue tint, and her hair shimmered like silver in the dim light. She was dressed in a form-fitting suit that looked like it was made of some kind of advanced material. Michael could see that she was injured. There was a deep gash on her arm, and she was breathing shallowly. Without thinking, Michael gently lifted her out of the ship and carried her back to his lab. He placed her on a table and began to treat her wounds as best as he could. As he worked, he couldn't help but marvel at her strange but beautiful appearance. Who was she? Where did she come from? And why had she crashed here of all places? Hours passed, and finally the girl began to stir. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing irises that glowed a soft, ethereal blue. For a moment, she just stared at Michael, as if trying to understand where she was and who he was. Then, suddenly, she bolted upright, backing away from him with a look of fear and confusion. "Who are you? What have you done to me?" she demanded, her voice shaky but strong. Michael raised his hands in a calming gesture. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Michael. I found you outside after your ship crashed. I just want to help." The girl looked around, taking in her surroundings. She seemed to be assessing whether she could trust him. After a moment, she relaxed slightly, though her guard was still up. "My name is Arya," she said cautiously. "I'm not from here." Michael smiled gently. "I figured that much. Don't worry, you're safe here. I'll help you get back on your feet and fix your ship if I can." Arya looked at him with a mixture of relief and suspicion. She was clearly not used to accepting help, especially from a human. But she was injured, and right now she didn't have much of a choice. "Thank you," she said finally, though the words seemed to come with difficulty. "But know this, I'm not here by choice. I need to get back to my people as soon as possible." Michael nodded, understanding the urgency in her voice. "I'll do everything I can to help you. But for now, you need to rest and let your body heal." Arya hesitated, then nodded slowly. She lay back down, still watching Michael closely. As she closed her eyes, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was the beginning of something much bigger than either of them could imagine. Something had brought Arya to Earth, and whatever it was about to change both of their lives forever. Over the next few days, Michael did everything he could to help Arya recover. He gave her food, let her rest, and carefully monitored her injuries. Slowly, she began to regain her strength. But as Arya recovered physically, Michael noticed something odd, something he hadn't expected. At first, it was small things. Arya, who had been cold and distant, started to show little signs of curiosity about the human world. She asked Michael questions about Earth, its people, and the strange technology in his lab. Her voice, once filled with suspicion, now had a softer tone, almost as if she was trying to understand more than just the facts. Michael found himself drawn to these conversations. He enjoyed explaining things to her, from the simplest human customs to the most complex scientific ideas. Arya listened intently, her glowing blue eyes focused on him with an intensity that made his heart race. But there was something more than just interest in her gaze, something that Michael couldn't quite put his finger on. Then, one evening, as they were talking about Earth's history, Arya suddenly fell silent. Michael noticed she was staring at him, her expression unreadable. He stopped mid-sentence, unsure of what was happening. "Michael," she said slowly, "I feel strange." Michael's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Arya hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "I've never felt this way before. It's like something inside me is changing. When I'm around you, I feel different. My thoughts are clouded, my emotions are—" She stopped, looking away as if embarrassed. "This isn't normal for my kind." Michael frowned, concern filling his eyes. "What kind of changes? Are you in pain?" Arya shook her head. "No, it's not pain. It's emotions. My people don't feel emotions like humans do. We're taught to control our minds, to stay logical and detached. But now I can't stop these feelings. They're growing stronger every day, and I don't know why." Michael's mind raced as he tried to make sense of what she was saying. He had always known that Arya's species was different, but he hadn't realized just how much. If they didn't feel emotions, then what was happening to her? "Arya," he said gently, "I think being around humans might be affecting you. Our emotions are powerful, and maybe somehow they're influencing you." Arya looked at him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. "But why? How could your emotions change me?" Michael shook his head. "I don't know, but I can run some tests, simple ones, to see if we can figure out what's happening." Arya hesitated, then nodded. "All right, I trust you." Michael set up a few basic tests, nothing invasive, just measurements of her brain activity, heart rate, and other vital signs while they talked. As they went through the tests, Michael could see the changes in real time. Her heart rate spiked when he spoke to her. Her brain activity showed patterns similar to humans experiencing strong emotions, and there was a noticeable shift in her body language. She was more relaxed, more open. But the biggest change was in her eyes. Every time their eyes met, Michael saw a flicker of something that hadn't been there before. Something warm, something deeply human. As the days passed, these changes became more pronounced. Arya, once distant and guarded, now sought out Michael's company. She asked more personal questions, wanted to know about his life, his dreams, his fears. And Michael, despite trying to keep things professional, found himself opening up to her in ways he hadn't with anyone else. But with these changes came a growing tension. Arya was confused, torn between her logical nature and the emotions that were quickly taking over. Michael could see the struggle in her eyes, the way she tried to fight against these new feelings. But he also saw the moments when she let her guard down, when she looked at him with a softness that made his heart ache. Michael knew that something extraordinary was happening, something neither of them fully understood. But he also knew that this was just the beginning. Whatever was happening to Arya, it was only going to get more intense, and he wasn't sure if either of them was ready for what was to come. As the days turned into weeks, the changes in Arya became impossible to ignore. What had started as small shifts in her behavior had now grown into something much more profound. She was no longer the cold, distant alien Michael had found in the wreckage of her ship. She had become someone who smiled, who laughed, and who seemed genuinely interested in Michael's life. But with these changes came a storm of emotions that Arya was struggling to control. One evening, Michael found Arya standing alone by the window of his lab, staring out at the night sky. The moonlight bathed her in a soft glow, making her appear almost ethereal. But there was a tension in her posture, a tightness in her shoulders, that told Michael something was wrong. "Arya," he called softly, stepping closer. "Are you all right?" Arya didn't turn to face him. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet, almost a whisper. "Michael, I'm scared." Michael's heart tightened at the vulnerability in her voice. "Scared? Of what?" "Of what's happening to me," she admitted. "These feelings. They're growing stronger every day. I can't control them anymore. When I'm with you, I feel things I've never felt before. But these feelings, they're not just confusing, they're terrifying." Michael moved closer, standing beside her. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the way she was struggling to make sense of her emotions. "Arya, it's okay to feel scared. These emotions are new to you, but that doesn't mean they're bad." Arya shook her head, her expression pained. "You don't understand, Michael. My people, we don't feel emotions like this. We're taught to control our minds, to stay logical and detached. But now I'm losing control. And the worst part is I'm starting to like it." Michael's breath caught in his throat. He had known that Arya was changing, but hearing her admit it so openly was still a shock. He had grown close to her, closer than he had ever expected, and now he realized just how much she had come to mean to him. "Arya," he began, choosing his words carefully. "It's okay to feel. Emotions are a part of being alive. They make us who we are. You don't have to fight them." Arya finally turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and longing. "But what if I can't control them? What if I end up hurting you or myself?" Michael reached out, gently taking her hand. "You won't. You're stronger than you think. And you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here with you." For a moment, they stood there in silence, just holding hands, the weight of the unspoken feelings between them growing heavier by the second. Michael could feel his heart pounding in his chest, and he knew that the time had come to say what he had been avoiding for so long. "Arya," he said softly, I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air, heavy and uncertain. Arya's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, Michael feared he had made a terrible mistake. But then, slowly, a tear rolled down her cheek, glistening in the moonlight. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never thought I could feel something like this. It's overwhelming, and it's tearing me apart." Michael gently wiped the tear from her cheek, his heart aching at the sight of her pain. "You don't have to do anything, Arya. Just let yourself feel. We'll figure this out together." Arya looked up at him, her eyes searching his for reassurance. "But what about my people? They would never understand. They would see this as a betrayal." Michael hesitated, knowing that this was the heart of the conflict. Arya's duty to her people was strong, but so were the emotions she was now experiencing. You have to decide what's more important to you, following the rules of your people or following your heart. Arya's breath caught, and for a moment she looked lost, torn between the two parts of herself. Finally, she spoke, her voice filled with a quiet determination. "I don't know if I can choose, but I do know that I don't want to lose you." Michael smiled, a sense of relief washing over him. "Then don't. We'll face whatever comes next together." As Arya leaned into him, resting her head against his chest, Michael knew that their journey was far from over. But for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope that they could find a way through the emotional conflict that had turned their lives upside down. The days after Arya and Michael admitted their feelings for each other were filled with a mixture of joy and dread. They grew closer, sharing moments of laughter, quiet conversations, and even dreams about what their future might hold. But beneath it all, there was an unspoken understanding that this happiness was fragile, temporary. One morning, as the sun was just beginning to rise, Arya received a message from her people. Her ship's systems had repaired enough to send a signal back to her homeworld, and they had responded quickly. The message was clear: return immediately. Her absence had been noticed, and her people demanded that she return to her duties. Michael found her in the lab, staring at the message on a small holographic screen. Her usually calm expression was gone, replaced by a look of deep sorrow. Michael's heart sank as he realized what this meant. "Arya?" he asked gently, stepping closer. "What's wrong?" Arya turned to him, her eyes filled with a sadness he had never seen before. "They've ordered me to come back, Michael. I have to leave." The words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He had known this moment would come, but it didn't make it any easier. "When do you have to go?" "Soon," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "My ship's repairs are almost complete. I'll be ready to leave by tomorrow." Tomorrow. Michael felt a wave of panic rise in his chest. Tomorrow? It was too soon. He wasn't ready to say goodbye. "Arya, you don't have to go," he said desperately. "You can stay here with me. We can figure something out, find a way to make this work." Arya shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "You don't understand, Michael. My people, they're not like humans. If I don't return, they'll come looking for me. And if they find out what's happened, what I've become, it could mean war. They won't understand our connection. To them, I would be a traitor." Michael's heart sank even further. He knew she was right. The stakes were too high and the risks too great. But the thought of losing her was unbearable. "But what about us? What about everything we've shared?" Arya took a deep, shuddering breath. "That's why this is so hard. I never imagined I could feel this way about anyone, let alone a human. But my duty to my people, it's everything I was raised to honor. If I stay, I'm not just betraying them, I'm betraying myself." Michael struggled to find the right words. He wanted to tell her to stay, to choose love over duty, but he knew that would be selfish. Arya was torn between two worlds, and he couldn't ask her to abandon one for the other. "Arya," he said softly, taking her hand in his, "I don't want you to go. But I also don't want to put you in a position where you have to choose between me and your people. You need to do what's right for you." Arya looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and heartbreak. "Michael, you've shown me a side of life I never knew existed. You've given me emotions, dreams, and love. But I have to go back. I have to try and explain what's happened, to make them understand." Michael nodded, though every fiber of his being was screaming at him to stop her. "I understand," he said, his voice trembling. "Just promise me one thing." "What?" she asked, her voice just as shaky. "Promise me that you'll come back if you can. That this isn't the end." Arya bit her lip, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I promise, Michael. If there's any way, I'll come back to you." With those words, they fell into each other's arms, holding on tightly as if their embrace could stop time. The thought of being apart felt like a knife to both of their hearts, but they knew it was the only choice they had. The next morning, Michael watched as Arya prepared to leave. Her ship was ready, hovering just above the ground, its sleek silver surface gleaming in the sunlight. As she stood at the entrance, ready to step inside, she turned back to Michael one last time. "I'll never forget you, Michael," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for everything." Michael forced a smile, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'll be waiting, Arya, no matter how long it takes." With a final, heart-wrenching look, Arya stepped into her ship, the door closing behind her. Michael watched as the ship slowly rose into the sky, growing smaller and smaller until it was just a dot on the horizon. And then it was gone. Michael stood there for a long time, staring at the empty sky, feeling a profound sense of loss. But beneath the sadness, there was also hope. A hope that one day Arya would return, and they would find a way to be together again. Weeks turned into months, and life slowly returned to normal for Michael. Or at least that's what he told himself. The lab, once a place of discovery and excitement, now felt emptier than ever. The nights were the hardest, with silence filling the spaces where Arya's presence had once been. Michael threw himself into his work, trying to fill the void she had left behind, but nothing seemed to help. Still, he kept his promise. Every evening, as the sun set, he would step outside and gaze up at the sky, searching for any sign of Arya's return. Each night he hoped to see her ship descending, to hear her voice calling out to him. But the sky remained empty, and the lab remained quiet. Then one day everything changed. Michael was in his lab, going through the motions of another long day, when the power suddenly flickered. The lights dimmed, the machines hummed louder, and the air seemed to crackle with energy. Michael looked around, confused, when a familiar sound reached his ears, a low hum, growing louder by the second. His heart raced as he rushed outside, his mind daring to hope. And there, descending from the sky, was Arya's ship. It gleamed in the sunlight, just as it had the first time he saw it, but this time there was no crash, no smoke. The ship landed smoothly on the ground, and the hatch slowly opened. Michael stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat as Arya stepped out. She looked different, stronger, more confident. But her eyes were the same, those glowing blue eyes that had haunted his dreams. "Arya!" he whispered, barely believing what he was seeing. Arya smiled, a warm, genuine smile that melted away all his doubts. "I told you I'd come back." Michael's legs finally moved, and he closed the distance between them in seconds. Without hesitation, he wrapped her in a tight embrace, feeling her warmth, her reality. "She was here, really here." "I didn't think you'd make it," Michael admitted, his voice thick with emotion. Arya pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. "It wasn't easy. My people, they didn't understand at first. It took time, a lot of convincing, but I made them see that what I felt, what we have, is real. It's not just a human thing. It's a universal truth. Love, connection, it's something that can cross any boundary." Michael felt a wave of relief and joy wash over him. "So what happens now?" Arya took his hand, her expression serious but filled with hope. "I'm here to stay, if you'll have me. I've been given permission to live on Earth, to learn more about your world, and to be with you. It's a new life, Michael, for both of us." Michael's heart soared. "Of course I'll have you." I never wanted anything else. With Arya by his side, Michael felt a sense of completeness that he hadn't known was possible. They spent the next few days adjusting to their new reality, finding a rhythm between their different worlds. Arya explored Earth with a curiosity and wonder that was infectious, and Michael rediscovered his own planet through her eyes. The small things he had taken for granted, like the feel of rain, the taste of food, the warmth of the sun, became new again. But it wasn't just about exploration. Arya and Michael also worked together, combining their knowledge to push the boundaries of science and technology. Their bond deepened, not just as partners in love, but as partners in discovery. They found a balance between their worlds, creating a life that was uniquely theirs. There were challenges, of course. Arya still had moments of struggle, adjusting to human emotions and customs, and Michael had to learn about her people, their ways, and their expectations. But together, they faced each challenge head-on, knowing that they had each other to lean on. As the months passed, their relationship grew stronger. Michael couldn't imagine his life without Arya, and she felt the same. They talked about the future, about what it might look like, a future where humans and Arya's people could learn from each other, where love could bridge the gap between different species. One evening, as they sat together under the stars, Arya turned to Michael, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder how all of this happened? How we found each other in such a vast universe?" Michael smiled, squeezing her hand. "All the time. But I've stopped trying to figure it out. Some things are just meant to be." Arya smiled back, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Yes, they are." And with that, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars, knowing that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. It was a new life, one filled with endless possibilities and a love that had transcended the stars.